Jy's ingeskakel op GROOTplaas. Ons gas saam met ons vanoggend Paul Makube, hy's 'n Senior Landbou-ekonoom by FNB Commercial. Ons gesels 'n bietjie oor hoër dieselpryse wat 'n landbou in strooptyd knou. Paul, good morning and welcome.
Good morning and thanks for having me.
Paul, so we just had a big diesel price increase. How damaging is the latest diesel price increases for South African farmers and the wider agricultural sector?
Yeah, obviously this is the biggest increase that we have had over the years, and obviously it comes at a time when farmers are going into their harvesting, planting in the winter crop areas. Obviously that is going to eat into profit margins, amid lower grain prices that we're currently experiencing.
So if we're looking at further increases later in May, there's going to be a slight decrease in diesel, but there is a petrol price increase. How is that going to be affecting our farmers?
Yes, obviously, it affects farmers in different ways. We have a variety of commodities that are being produced in South Africa, and obviously they've got different cycles. You've got livestock, for example, that is constantly needing movement from one area to another. Produce from farm to farm, from farm to market. And then you have as I indicated that grain farmers will be facing a high activity month June, July, in terms of harvesting. And obviously that increases the cost of fuel, and obviously eroding producer margins is the worry. And obviously the sector will have to absorb it initially. You must recall that farmers are actually price takers, and therefore it is actually difficult to actually pass on this cost to the consumer in the immediate term.
So, Paul, when we look at what is happening in the Middle East, it doesn't look like this conflict situation is going to be resolved anytime soon. How long are our farmers going to be able to absorb these increases before they have to start looking to the bank for a little bit of relief?
Obviously, another 2 months of this increase will actually be devastating for the farmers, and obviously the preparations are already underway to actually see how the bank can accommodate some of the farmers in terms of their requirements. Obviously, it depends from individual to individual, but further increases will be devastating in terms of their operations. Remember, fuel is a non-discretionary input item in the in the operations of farming. And therefore, further increases will, put pressure on the farmers. In the grain sector, you're likely to see perhaps a contraction in planted area in the next season, given the high, costs that are associated with, planting. And obviously, farmers can, to some extent, cut or bring about efficiencies to absorb costs. But there's a limit that they can do.
So you've mentioned now that fuel's considered non-discretionary when it comes to the cost in farming. Why is this?
Obviously, farmers requires energy to actually run operations. You need from planting to running generators, running cold rooms. Etc. They all need energy, and an increase in costs obviously, impact them, negatively if it is, sustained. It's non-discretionary because you can't operate without it. There is no alternative at the moment. You have to, move, produce from farm, inputs from, suppliers to your farm. You need, either, trucks, or you need tractors to operate, and all of them requires fuel. Diesel is very, very critical in that process.
Now, Paul, a lot of people have been speaking about, obviously, government stepping in with the fuel levy, but how much worse could it have been, could the situation have been, should the government have not stepped in with the fuel levy cut that they have?
Obviously, depending on the fuel type, if you look at petrol, it's just over, 5 rand extra that, farmers have been spared from, paying. If you look at diesel, it's even more, over 12 rand, just over 12 rand, extra that, the farmers could have, paid. Obviously, government has, extended this, which is, most welcome. But obviously, further increases might, even require more further accommodation for the agricultural sector, in line with what has happened during the COVID period in terms of prioritization of agriculture. Because in terms of, production, it might be even more difficult to actually, operate at, those margins that will be coming if we have further increases.
So that's one of the biggest questions, obviously, is with this fuel levy relief from government side, that's a temporary step that's been extended, but that can't be happening for the foreseeable future because government is losing money. When will they start reintroducing that?
Indications are that up to June, and we don't know whether July onwards that will be happening. It might, if it is pulled back, then we will sit with a very high, cost of operations. As I indicated, it might be time to actually, talk to government in terms of prioritization of certain, sectors of the economy critical, such as agriculture, because we're dealing with biological items. So it is not easy to cut, operating or reduce operations. If you have, cattle to milk or dairy cows to milk, you have to milk them. If you have to slaughter, you have to slaughter. If you have to pick up, fruits from the trees, for the market, you have to do it because if you leave them there, then there is loss of quality. And obviously, farmers may, have faced, serious losses. But if you look at that, you also have to consider the fact that there's a potential, inflationary impact on the consumer going forward if we have a total collapse of the agricultural sector due to, higher, production costs.
Paul, we're going to be back with you in a second. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas vanoggend. Paul Makube, hy's 'n Senior Landbou-ekonoom by FNB Commercial. Ons gesels 'n bietjie oor dieselpryse en dit natuurlik wat die strooptyd 'n bietjie knou. Ons is terug op GROOTplaas net hier. Welkom terug hier op GROOTplaas en ons gesels vanoggend met Paul Makube, hy's 'n Senior Landbou-ekonoom by FNB se kommersiële afdeling. Paul, so you mentioned that grain is one of the industries that are going to be affected, and also oilseed farmers especially vulnerable at this stage. Why is that?
Given the time in the calendar of the agricultural sector, this is a high activity period. We are entering into harvesting, the biggest crop that we are going to get from that is currently on the lands. The winter crop season has just started, and activity there is is getting momentum. And obviously, this is a high demand period for fuel, and with increases in fuel cost, obviously. That already cut on profit margins because, as indicated, you are not able to immediately pass on this cost, especially the fact that we don't have a corresponding upswing in the commodity prices. We're currently sitting at the maize prices that are actually at a very low level. And the further increases, obviously, that those margins are going to be very, very, very tight.
Paul, do you mind just explaining that for some of our viewers, how lower maize prices could make it harder for farmers to absorb the fuel increases?
If you look at maize prices currently, both yellow and white, we're talking about 30% down on last year. If you look at the current, trajectory. And the futures also indicate that we have not seen a significant upswing in prices. We need a price north of 4,300 to be comfortable that we get margins that will encourage farmers to plant next year. So at the current levels, the farmers are actually feeling the pinch. In terms of the increases in fuel cost that is currently happening.
So let's just quickly talk about the consumers, because at the end of the day, the consumers are also going to feel the pinch, as you say. Why can't farmers just simply pass the extra fuel costs on to the consumers?
The difficulty there is that you've got before the consumer receives the product. There is a middleman, and obviously the middleman is the most important part of actually passing on costs to the consumers. The farmers are just price takers. They have to face what the buyers are indicating, and if they are not prepared to pay more for your product, then that's it. You have a situation where you have to sell your product. What happens is that the product goes up the value chain, but fortunately for the consumer, if you look at the current price trajectory, and in fact over the past 8 months, in the grain and oilseed industry, prices have been relatively low, and which means that processors were operating under raw input costs into milling and so on, at a low level. So obviously that has provided some margin that can help them actually absorb in the near term, but obviously increases to some extent will have to be passed on. It might not be that as stiff as one had expected, given that a low input prices on their side from a processing perspective, but obviously there's going to be an element of pass on to the consumer. But if the trajectory continues as we see into August, September, and so on, we're likely to see, the upswing in consumer inflation, as it were.
Paul, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. Ons gas op GROOTplaas vanoggend gewees, Paul Makube. Hy's 'n Senior Landbou-ekonoom by FNB Commercial om te gesels oor hoër dieselpryse in die landbou spesiaal nou so in 'n strooptyd in. Dis al wat vir ons tyd het vir GROOTplaas vir vandag. Ons hoop jy het lekker saam met ons gekuier en ons is op pad Nampo toe. So as jy daar is, kom maak gerus 'n draai en sê hallo. Jennifer staan in vir my vir die res van die week en dan sien ons mekaar weer volgende week.